Okay yata ito
Yung
pag
USD.
lumabas. Mahal na ng diesel ngayon, pre.
Uy, kano ba? Di ba 19?
170 yata.
170? Takin naman.
150 or 170. Tignan
Kaya
ko.
ako yung kaibigan ko yung 90 daw sa Davao eh.
Oo. Diesel ba gas? Gas yata yun eh.
Sa ata.
Oo, gas yun. Mas mura ang gas.
Sabi yung
Baliktad
diesel
na.
sa kotse.
Diesel. Meron din kotse tsaka
Ano yung mas
mga
magandang
truck.
klase?
Mas matipid ang diesel. Mas matagal maubos.
Kaya pala.
Pero kaya gamit siya sa mga industrial
Oo.
ang diesel. Generator, bulldozer, mga ganun. Gasolina karamihan sa kotse. Private.
In-upgrade mo na kaya siguro nawala na yung ano. Ayun. Nawala na yung effect.
Nawala na yung snow.
Oo.
Siguro.
Kasi nung...
Pero nilalamig ka pa rin yata eh. Di ba?
Eh, yung snow sa ano pre.
Sa bahay.
Sa bahay. Is...
Iron dust. Ba yan? Dami naman na yan. Stream ka boy.
Oo, pa rin nakastream na.
Yun.
Sap nga balikan ng balay, may kaso parang wala na ng baba dun.
Walang update.
Huwag na lang.
Naalala ko yung huli natin dun, yung sa may usok. Kung ano man. Update na yun.
Wala eh. Takin na mo, ba't naging ganyan?
Hindi mo magamit yung kurbada.
Ikaw, naging ganito. Pwede rin pala. Para maganda rin. Anong kurbada? Yung arc?
O yung art.
Hindi nga eh.
Masyado malaki. Hindi rin pwede i-flat. Pwede diba? Pwede siya i-flat. Kasi hindi pwede pagpatungin.
Hindi.
Hindi nagki-clip. Magnet. Buti hindi sumasakit daliri mo, pre.
Tsaka ka.
Pag matawal sa computer, sumasakit sa akin eh.
Okay naman. Malakas ka ata pumindot ko. Ikaw, hindi pa nangyari sa akin.
Persado eh. Di ba?
Oh,
Ayoko
hindi
talaga
pa.
yung parati sa akin.
Yung wrist ko lang pala, wrist.
Ay, hindi
Dati.
sumasakit yung akin.
Lalo na nung nagla-laptop ako. Kasi parang nakakurba eh.
Yun nga yun.
Yung kamay ko. Masakit dati. Pero ngayon hindi na.
Kahit
Wala
pag
na may
nagmamotor
sakit.
ako eh.
Yung leg ko lang
Dito
yung
pa siya.
sumasakit eh.
Leg din.
Hmm.
Bad posture.
Oo, pre. Parang may bump na ako sa likod. Ikaw. Gusto ko ayusin eh. May bukol pa eh.
Bump. Ay gago. Yung ano mo, yung spinal mo, nakakurba din.
Oo, pre. Kaya binabantayan ko na ng konti. Ayun ang
Ano lang yan eh. Na ano ko lang pag sumasakit. Anong
ayos.
tawag doon? Flanking.
Hmm.
Nawawala naman. Makabalik din syempre.
Oo, lalo na pag buong araw.
Ngawit.
Yes. Solid. Ano kaya ako gagawa ng stairs?
Pangit ba yung paikot?
Wala tang
Ano ba
paikot
plano mo?
dito eh. Yung kapaikot.
Ladder?
Oo,
Paikot.
pangit.
Pangit ka. Hirap akyatin.
Wala kasing ano dito eh. Customizable na shit.
Kaya nga.
Mas maano pa yung alok. Mas maano pa
Pagdating
yung
doon,
building. Oo.
may ladder, di ba?
Oo.
Ganda ng building din eh. Base building.
Ganda nga. Ganda.
Okay ka lang gumawa ng gabi.
Okay lang.
May hantiin kasi akong halaman eh.
Okay lang.
Gabi lang magre-rest. Babak ko lang ah.
Ah.
Rejoin ka na lang. Okay lang.
In this one, I'm going to show you how I made this overgrown city render right here. I actually had a lot of fun with this one. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, and I haven't done an environment like this in a little while, so definitely should do more of these overgrown renders. If you work on environments in Blender, this should be hopefully helpful for you. So I just recorded myself making the whole thing, and I'll explain what I was doing and thinking the whole way through. So we'll just get into it. Okay, so I was using this mood board off to the side throughout the whole render, pretty much. You can see the heavy like Soviet era inspiration going on here. There's also some like Destiny 1 or Destiny concept art thrown in here too, just to kind of get the vibes going. So I was looking at that the whole time making this. I mean, I'm on a widescreen monitor, so it's off to the side. You can't see it, but that's what I was looking at. And then I'm just starting out with some modeling. I really like those like curved, brutalist kind of shapes in one of those reference images. Some building in Russia, I think. So I'm kind of going for that shape a little bit. Just in more of a straight line rather than like that circular building, but just kind of taking some inspiration from those shapes there. You can see too, like the modeling here is really rough. It's like not great technique, not perfect. A lot of endbounds going on. The thing is, it doesn't really matter at this early stage. It's just important to just get something going on and not worry about if it looks great or if it's perfect or like technically it's like, well done or whatever. I think it's important to just start and do something rather than nothing, and just get it going so that you have a thing going on, and then if you need to change it and make it look better later, you can do that. But if you just start working on something and not worry about it, like that's a lot better than trying to make it perfect and then ending up with nothing. So yeah, anyways, I'm throwing on a concrete texture here. This one's just a free texture from Polyhaven. So what I was doing was I started out with just a base layer concrete, which is like pretty minimalist and boring on its own. Like it works for what it is, but it's just a regular, pretty minimal concrete texture. And then I'm throwing in this weird, like, I don't even know if this is a rust or concrete with like water stains going on. That image is from Unsplash, which is not really a texture website, but I'm just using one from there because it was close enough. And then I'm layering that in to the base color. And then I'm actually layering in another base color image from a different even texture. This one's tiles. So there's actually 3 different kind of base color maps getting mixed in here. And that's creating a really grungy, like detailed, layered look to the concrete, which is really nice. And then once you have a texture like that, which just works on a model like this, there's a lot going on in this texture, and it means I can actually use that texture on a lot of different stuff in the scene and reuse it a lot. And it's gonna look interesting and like it fits in still, just because it's like weathered and worn and like there's a lot of detail in it. So it's kind of nice to be able to just work on a texture at the start and then use it on like a lot of things going forward. And then for these wireframe things, there's an interesting technique with that, which is really easy. You just get like an array of cubes, And then there's a modifier stack, which is just the triangulate modifier, followed by a wireframe modifier. That creates this like triangulated thing here. That thing is really nice for like brutalist renders like this, where it's just you want a quick and dirty like wireframe thing without looking just like a bunch of boxes. So that's really nice to have there. And then I'm reusing that a bunch there. The texture on that one too, by the way, just a rust texture from Polyhaven. No modifications. I think all I did was just take out this displacement map because I don't want any displacement on that. So just a regular rust texture on that. And then I'm bringing in some trees here. These are from Sweeper 3D's add-on, his add-on Arborea. So he actually just did an update recently, added like, I think like 150 new assets. So if you have it already, you could just update that add-on and download the new pack and you'll get all that. But yeah, that add-on has been super helpful for this one. You're gonna see that a lot in this render just because it's an overgrown thing. Lots of Arborea plants and trees and stuff brought in this one, which I'll get to in a bit. Yeah, these models here I'm bringing in, these like scaffolding and stairs and stuff, those are just like free. Those are part of like the free packs I've given away. So I can link that in the description too if you want to download that stuff. But yeah, I have videos on making that too, like making industrial stairs and scaffolding and like really like not old, but just industrial models like that. You can find that on my channel. So yeah, here I'm doing some scattering, just again using Arborea. It has a built-in scatter system, which is really nice. So just kind of getting some grass on the ground here. I found it was a little mismatched with this concrete floor, just with grass growing directly out of it. So I took just like a moss texture from Polyhaven, put that in a group. You can just select the nodes, Control G, group it, and then I'm just mixing that with the original concrete texture. With I think one of the base color maps has actually the mix factor, or maybe all of them, like the end of that chain with all the different base color maps. That's the mix factor between those two textures. That's definitely something I would try again. That worked really well. And then yeah, I'm taking these are like, again, free pipe models. These are all packs I've given away on my channel. You probably know or have these packs. But yeah, I'm making a few new pipes with just a cylinder and then the spin tool. So you can see just doing that, adding some extrusions, quick unwrap with I did a proper unwrap this time, pretty weird for me, but there it is. And then yeah, just getting that in there just because it was a weird shape. I wanted to kind of like wrap around these weird shapes I already had going on. And then yeah, I'm just getting more like scaffolding and stuff in here. At this point, I knew I liked this render, but I wasn't super sure with exactly how I wanted to fill in the details. So you can kind of see me like just mucking around here and just struggling with kind of what to do. But yeah, anyways, I'm getting some volume in here, which usually doesn't look too great in like sunny day renders. In this one though, I found it worked really well, which is nice to see because sometimes too much volume in a sunny render just looks really weird and off. I was definitely keeping the density low here though, so yeah. Anyways, the lighting right now, I should have mentioned, isn't just an HDRI, again from Polyhaven. All these things are just from the Polyhaven add-on. It's a paid add-on, but you can get them all free from their website. Doesn't really matter where you get textures or HDRIs. It's just this is just the stuff I've been using lately. And then yeah, you can see this is kind of where I'm struggling and just kind of doing stuff. Like sometimes that's a good solution to when you're stuck, is just like just go and do something. Like you'll just figure out kind of along the way as you're working on stuff, and it'll get, even if what you're doing is not kind of like what I'm doing here, adding these little wires or whatever. Sometimes just doing something will give you more ideas of like bigger things that can work in there. For example, when I added that volume cube in the scene, one of the things that happened was I moved it up and over the scene, and it looked kind of interesting there, like kind of a cool placement, and it just instantly gave me an idea of like, oh, there could be like bridges moving across here. So you can see that in there now. That's how I thought of doing that, is just by adding the volume cube and just taking the next step forward. And just by accident, by placing it in a weird spot, it was like, oh, that could be something. Okay, so I'm finding it, like I'm trying out different camera angles here and like just playing around with different lighting, and just here I'm adding a sky. So this is just an image I took on my camera I think a while ago, just of like a sunny day. And then yeah, just putting that on an emissive plane. I actually switched that one out for, this is just an unsplash download dramatic sky image. This one I found worked a little better just because the clouds were more what I was looking for. I I really love in a daytime render these really like crisp clouds. I don't know what you call that, but yeah, those just really nice and crisp clouds are just like those hit really hard in a daytime render for some reason. Just gives it a certain feeling which I like, where it's like you can still see a bit of blue sky, but then those really they're like very clearly defined, like sharp, crispy clouds. Whatever that is, it just looks amazing. And then yeah, I've got some issues going on here with like overlapping models and stuff, so I'm just going in and fixing that. You can see like, this modeling is really, really messy back there, but it doesn't matter. It's like way in the back. No one's gonna see that, so who cares? Well, actually, I guess Staff is gonna see it now because I'm recording it. But anyways, it does like you're not gonna see that in the actual render, so it doesn't matter. And then yeah, I'm making the floor and like the a little more interesting by adjusting the roughness levels with that color ramp. You can see here I'm bringing in some models from Polyhaven 2, just trying to fill up space and like keep it chugging along. And then yeah, here I'm bringing in some like ground scatter models from Arborea. So just bringing in some like weeds and plants and stuff, some ivy, and then I'm kind of just getting that on the floor so it's a little bit less two-dimensional. So something I really like doing is just getting like even like just slightly elevated model off the ground. That just helps it not feel as like flat two-dimensional floor plane. Then you can see I'm just kind of spamming this ivy around here. I think these are some of the new ivy models he added add-on, so that's really nice to have in there. And then this is a trick I've been doing lately, which I actually learned from Sweeper as well, which is the symbol deform modifier set to bend. You can just bend models around curved surfaces like that, so you can work with ivy. And then here I'm bringing in these are actually again from another free pack.
My favorite patron.
Which, I don't know, I just have a habit of like, when I'm making a video, I just use my own free packs. But anyways, I'll link that below, the free buildings pack. So I just brought in those buildings. That actually totally changed the vibe to more of like, I wasn't sure if I was going for like a city or like old research center or whatever, or like transit station. I don't really know, but just having those buildings in here, and then
Kuha ka rin
I'm
log,
using
pre,
actually
wala na
a
tayo.
checker deselect. No, a random
Yan?
deselect. It's actually called
Log.
random select. Set
Log.
Naglalag ka?
Walang log.
deselect
Yung
before
puno.
you like confirm
Ay.
Kahoy.
that thing. Then you can do a random
Log.
deselect.
Nauusan na tayo, pre.
Just random windows. That'll make it look more abandoned and cool.
Sure ka? Naubos yun?
I'm just adjusting the color of those to be more like blue, more warm, a little less metallic, and just a
Oh,
little more
putol.
rough, so that they're like, more grungy, more abandoned looking, just like the kind
Pwede
of
ba
stuff
yung
you see
tropical
in
log?
the
Hindi.
apocalypse type material.
Hindi.
And then yeah,
Hindi.
more ivy, just kind of spamming that around with that, and that's helping it make it feel more overgrown too, obviously. And then I'm just doing the classic like weight paint. There is
Saan ba
like,
maganda
a manual
magtutun?
scatter add-on, section 2 in the add-on. I like the weight paint though. It's just like that's what I'm more familiar with. It's just like kind of my go-to when I just want to get it in there. And then yeah, I'm just kind of getting more trees in here. I'm just kind of figuring out what to do. At this point though, I was actually starting to be a lot happier with the overgrown vibe. There's kind of this weird transition point where you're making an overgrown render where it just feels like a regular render with some plants, and then you just keep adding more and more plants, and eventually it just starts to look overgrown. So there's no real point where that happens, but you just kind of keep adding plants, and then eventually it just becomes overgrown, I guess. And then yeah, this camera angle here I actually liked a lot more, where it's like we're getting that pipe in the foreground, and then it's kind of just working well with all the other lines in the composition here. And then yeah, I'm doing like more of that. Like,
Yung sa bahay,
line
pre, doon mo nilagay.
scaffolding. Not
Oh.
scaffolding. I don't know. Whatever you call that. Exposed. Whatever that is. And then yeah, I'm just kind of putting more trees around too, having them like half poking out of the building. That's kind of making it feel a little bit more overgrown in there too. More pipes. Just kind of throwing whatever I can in there to fill up that kind of weird, awkward space in the middle there. And then I'm just trying out like different ideas for the vanishing point up there. So what I found worked really well was just duplicating the entire setup there, past itself again, just so it continues onwards. That was actually a really good call, I think, because it just made it feel like it's like no extra effort, but it makes it feel way more giant, way more vast.
Mga ilan kailangan mo, pre? Libo.
Dami.
And then yeah, I'm just
Sobra?
adding more trees
Oo.
again, just
Tama lang.
trying to make
100.
it even more overgrown.
2,000.
Sige lang.
Continuing to throw plants at this and just
100,000. Sige.
I think another key with making it feel overgrown too is like
Kaya.
not putting trees and plants in a place that looks like you would plant them. And then yeah, I'm just kind of like choosing different building placements. I like that one a bit more sideways so you can see more of those like missing windows. You can see like it's just slowly becoming more and more detailed. When it gets to like that point where you're kind of realizing like, okay, yeah, this render is gonna be cool, I like it, you kind of just keep working on it, and eventually stuff just happens, and you just keep doing things, and it just keeps getting better and better, and like it's yeah, that's what happens a lot of the times. You just decide, okay, I'm gonna sit down and just work on it, and then you'll just do stuff, and it'll just make it better. So I spent a while just trying out different lighting setups with just moving the sun around. I just couldn't. I struggle with sun lamps sometimes. It was just really hard to find like a really good spot to point the sun. It just wasn't like, it would look good in some areas, and then some other areas are just like, I don't like that there. And then yeah, because you're dealing with like one light covering the entire scene, it's a little hard to get that really in the perfect spot sometimes. So one thing I did here was add this cloud cover thing. So it's just a plane with noise texture running into the alpha. So we're like basically blocking out some patches of light, and then I'm just turning that off from camera view. So you cannot see it even though it's in the camera view. So it'll cast shadows, but you can't see it directly. And then that was helping because you're getting more like patchy lighting, makes it a little more dramatic because there's like a lot more just dark spots coming in now. So that was one good thing that helped. Oh, I did get some wires in here, so I have videos on my channel like making wires too. There's one called 3 Essential Environment Models. If you want to learn how to make like the wires, the stairs, all that stuff, that's a good video to watch on my channel. But yeah, that was a nice little touch here, just those wires. I don't know, just works really well in like city renders or like abandoned renders even too. Like, it's just cool to have those for some reason. Yeah, I think with the lighting here, I could have. Oh, here. So you can see me adding the spotlight, and then just kind of placing that in a similar place where the sun's already shining, except it's just kind of amplifying the light that's already there. And then I found that actually making the sun a little bit darker than what it was, and then having more brightness on that spotlight, that was meaning that, okay, the rest of the scene is going to be a little darker, and then we get this really bright spot. It still looks kind of like sun. You want it to feel like kind of the same light source, but having that there, that worked really well, where it's like, okay, now it feels more like something important is happening in this spot. It's more like, yeah, you can see like just bright and interesting in that one area, but it's not like clashing with the sun at all. It's just kind of enhancing what's already there. So yeah, that took a while with the lighting to get that right, but I'm actually pretty happy with it in the end, where it's like, that's a good mixture where it's like sun lamp and then like a spotlight in the one area, as long as it's not clashing with in the one area that is like going to be important. And then yeah, here's the Photoshop process. So I use the mist pass to get a mask so I can like brush in smoke in certain areas. I saved the glare node as a separate image and just brush that in like certain areas, and just, but you could just use the glare node normally. It's fine to do that too. And then I re-rendered with a better mist pass, just because I didn't have the settings quite right. So re-render, take the mist pass again, and then I actually saved a separate copy with no volume. So I did that render with no volume just because I was running mist pass only. But it's actually kind of a cool thing. It meant I could actually brush in no volume sections into like certain parts of the image. I'd never really tried that before, but it worked kind of interestingly here, where it's like we can get an extra smoky kind of look, an extra crisp look in some areas where it's like we're actually kind of enhancing the contrast between like volume areas and no volume areas. Kind of interesting method. And then yeah, here's the camera raw.
Okay na, pre.
So we're adding like, this is where I'm adding like contrast,
1,000 yan.
saturation, clarity.
Hindi ka na maubusan.
Doing a bit of like dehaze in certain areas, enhancing like the lens flare, not really lens flare, but just like the bright spot where the sun's coming from, just making that even brighter, to kind of show like a bit of a flare kind of thing. Messing with the colors a little bit, just getting them a little more like, I don't know, doing a bit of split toning, so some blue, cool tones and shadows, and then just like refining certain areas. So it was a little overexposed at the top there, so I'm just localizing the area and just bringing the exposure down a little bit so it's not so blown out. And then yeah, that made a huge difference. The camera raw filter always just makes it so much better. and you can see here's the final result. Okay, that's it for this one. If you want the most help from me that you can get for environments, you might want to check out the Cyber Environments course, which I'll link below. That'll teach you step by step how to make 10 different environments. Comes with
Sinalo. Gagong hirap. Hirap pre.
Hirap gawin.
Yes.
Suko na.
Gusto ko tapusin kaso basic tong ano eh. Hirap kontrolin ng build eh.
Hmm.
Kaya mo.
Oo ka.
Wala kasi maliliit eh. Sa isa ga...
Walang straight.
Wala. Lang alam ko mayroong ano diba? Itong pillar. Baka ito pwede na to. Haba.
Yun pre, minamata mo na lang.
Oh, gago. Paplanuhin ko pa. Ay,
Tagal yan.
boss, no.
Wala kasing built-in na pa spiral eh, no?
Mm. Gago, ayaw lumagpas. Parang tanga. Ayaw dumikit. Balik tayo sa isa-isa.
Ano bang pangalan nun? To?
Hmm?
Ito ba yun? Yung dinidikit mo?
Oh, yung pillar. Ayaw eh. Ayaw magdikit sa tabi.
Pangit naman yan.
Babaliw na ako.
Ayaw mo yung ano na lang, simple hagdat. Yung biglang liliko. Ayaw. Gusto mo maganda.
Hindi, ako na. Unti-untiin ko na lang.
Kahit hanggang third floor lang muna.
Nagawa na rin eh.
Oo. Para pag ano, ilipat ko na yung mga gamit.
muna, gagawa ko to ng chest room. Doon ilagay yung gamit.
Huwag muna.
Ah,
Sige.
gawa natin ng lugar yan.
Alright, so let's start by grabbing a model. I'm gonna use Blender Kit, but you can use any model. Now that we have our model, let's create an infinite backdrop. Add a plane, then extrude the back edge and simply bevel it. And by the way, make the scale a bit larger so it covers the whole scene, because when we move the camera around, it might go out of the frame. And I'm just going to split the window so I can see the timeline more clearly. Now this is where the main part begins. I'm going to add a camera and place it in front of the chair so the chair comes in the center. For this entire animation, I'll keep the focal length at 90 mm, but you can use whatever works for you. Once that's done, I'll highly recommend organizing your scene by naming everything properly. Since I'm only using this camera for the first shot, I'll name it shot 1. Also, let's put this camera into a collection, so you can name it whatever you like, but I'll go with shot 1. For the camera movements, I won't rely too much on the camera itself. Instead, I'll add an empty, name it whatever I like, and place it in the shot 1 collection. Now, since we want the camera to move around the model, I'm not going to rotate the camera directly. Instead, I'll parent it to the empty. So when I rotate the empty, the camera follows in a nice circular motion, which is exactly what we want. Alright, let's start with the first shot. We begin with an entry animation where the camera slowly moves toward the subject to reveal the product. Then the exit animation kicks in, and that's where we transition to the next shot. Since we already have the end position, I will move the playhead to around frame 40 or 50. Then hover over the location and press I to add a keyframe. You can also use K if you prefer. Then I will go back to frame 1, pull the camera slightly backwards and add another keyframe. And honestly, it already looks pretty good. Now for the exit animation, since the movement starts slowly, I'll begin it a bit earlier around frame 40 and add a rotation keyframe. I'll keep the duration around 15 frames, so I'll move 55th, increase the Z rotation by about 30 degrees and insert another keyframe. Alright, this looks good to me, so I will move over to the graph editor. Then I will lock the X and Y axis so they don't interfere. And to make the graph easier to work with, you can press normalize and then hit home on your keyboard. After that, I will select these two handles in the graph and scale them along the x-axis. Then I will play the animation and adjust the handle based on what looks good. By the way, if you scale them too much, the motion becomes too fast, and it's all about finding the right balance. Now I think 15 frames is a bit too short, so I will increase it to 20 frames. And I feel like 30 degrees is a bit too low, so I'm going to push it up to 40 degrees. Now let's start working on the second shot. I will duplicate both the empty and the camera, then move the empty to the next focus area of the model. Also, don't forget to rename the empty and the camera and move them into a new collection called Shot 2. Also, the camera currently has the same keyframes as Shot 1, so I'm going to delete them as well. Now I want to write down some values to keep my animation consistent, and it will also help speed up my workflow. Alright, so here are the main values I'll be using. First, the rotation for each transition, which is 40 degrees. Second, the duration of each transition, which is 20 frames. And third, when the transition starts, which is after 40 frames. Alright, let's delete the previous keyframes and start with the new one. Now to switch between cameras, we need to find the point where the motion is the fastest, which is usually right in the middle between the keyframes in shot 1. So I will place the playhead at the middle around frame 50. Select the shot to camera and press Ctrl plus B to assign it. Then I will go back to frame 1 and assign the shot 1 camera as well. Now if you play the animation, you can see the cameras are switching perfectly. Now based on my notes, I should be using a rotation of 40 degrees, but that value was for the exit animation, and since we are working on the entry animation, I'll use the negative 40 instead. After that, the shot transition starts at frame 40, so I will place the playhead at frame 40 and insert a rotation keyframe. Since the transition lasts 20 frames, I will move forward to frame 60 and reset the rotation back to 0 and insert another keyframe. Now it's time for the graph editor. Luckily I have a free add-on called Relative Ease, which lets you copy and paste easing really easily, and you can use it too. So I will just copy the easings from shot 1 and paste it into shot 2. Now if you play the animation, you can see the transition between the two cameras is much smoother. Now let's add another note, which is the duration of a single shot. After that, we don't want the animation to stop after the transition. We want it to keep moving. So what I'll do is continue the rotation until the next transition starts, which is after 40 frames. So I will go to frame 90 and add another keyframe with a rotation of 10 degrees. Alright, so the animation continues even after the transition. Next, let's work on the exit animation. Looking at the notes, we just need to add another keyframe 20 frames later. Since the transition requires 40 degrees of rotation and we already have 10 degrees, I'll add 40 more, bringing it to a total of 50 degrees. Now in the graph editor, I'll just copy and paste the easings. Now if you play the animation, you can see that the flow isn't smooth. There's a literal bump right after the transition, which is because of the graph editor. To fix that and make the animation smoother, we need to remove that bump. So I will select the middle point of the handles and rotate it until the bump disappears. Now if I play the animation from the start, you can see that it's much smoother than before. From here, I'll speed up the process since I have already explained the enter animation, exit animation, easing and everything else. Now we just need to repeat these steps. First, I will duplicate the camera and the empty, then rename them to shot 3 and place them into a new collection called shot 3. After that, I will duplicate all the keyframes and position the empty where I want the focus. Then I will assign the camera 50 frames after the last camera switch. Next, I will add keyframes for the entry animation with a rotation of negative 40 degrees. Then I will copy and paste the easings. After that, I will add an extra 10 degrees of rotation so the motion continues even after the transition. Then I will add another keyframe for the exit animation and apply easing to this part as well. Finally, I will smooth out the animation, and that's it for the shot 3. Now for the animation showcasing the back of the model, I won't rotate the model in this scene. Instead, I'll click this button and use full copy to create a duplicate of this scene. Now you can rotate the model here and continue with the same steps we just learned. Now what I'll do is speed up the tutorial, since you just need to change the position of the empties from the previous shots. There is no need to delete or add anything, just move the empties. Lastly, once you are done with everything here, you can copy the full scene again and create another shot showcasing the front of the model one last time. Now I just realized that I forgot to add lights, so I'll quickly add an area light on the right side of the scene and increase the intensity. Nothing fancy here. Then I'll just duplicate the same light and position it on the left side of the model. And I don't want this light to affect the shadows, so I'll link it to the model only. And you can also just copy the lights and paste them into the other scenes. And then you can comment down below and subscribe to the channel if you like. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope you liked it.
I had only 3 days to make a 60-second promo video. The client was Realty Pro, a subscription service for real estate agents in the US. Budget was $450. The client gave me a script with 8 scenes and transitions. They also shared some design references from their website, but those are only static images. No animations, no pre-built assets, just text and flat pictures. So how do you turn this into a complete motion design video in only 3 days? Let me show you step by step. So the script had 8 lines. I divided them into 8 scenes inside After Effects, 1 comp for each scenes. I also had to make sure that these 8 scenes should have seamless transition, so they don't look like animated presentation slides. The website screenshots gave me some colors and design ideas, but since they were static, I couldn't animate them. So I created everything inside After Effects. Normally, I use Illustrator to prepare designs, but because of the tight deadline, I skip it. Recreating all the assets directly in After Effects saved me time and let me start animating right away. So I created a new comp, renamed it properly, and added a gradient background. Now here I pick the music. This step is important because music sets the pace and overall flow of the video. Then I added the first line of text. At this point I had no idea what the final video would look like, and that's fine. This is what I call the exploratory process. It means you don't always need a full plan before you start. Sometimes you just begin with one small thing, maybe a word, maybe a shape, maybe a piece of music, and while you're working, new ideas appear. For example, when you write text in a comp, you may suddenly notice a shape or a pattern you can play with. It's like building and discovering at the same time. You're not waiting for the perfect idea to come first, you just let the idea reveal itself as you work. So when I was rearranging the first text, I noticed these two dots. So I animated them as eyes blinking and moving to match the meaning of the word, like waiting for someone. Then I uses the same two circles to transition into the next scenes. That becomes my first visual motif. So let me explain that. So for example, in the next line of text, there's a question mark. I made that symbol the main element of the scene. This is where the idea of a motif becomes powerful. A motif is a shape or symbol or any element that comes back again and again in your video. You can use it in many ways. This makes your video feels connected. In my video, the primary motif was circles and the secondary motif was character from the text, like the question mark. Now for scene 3, I used a circle move transition. Two circles merged, split apart and revealed a globe. The globe was a 3D sphere with gloss material. Basically this was a 3D element and I used a precom map as texture. Next, I had to show available and own leads on the US map. So I cut from the globe into a flat US map. This is called a match cut. One shape changes into another, making the transition smooth. To make the map look slightly curved, I used optic compensation. Then I turned it into a 3D layer, added small 3D circles as dots and spread them across the US. Finally, I animated the camera to pan across the map while the text appeared. To move to the next scene, I scaled one circle until it covered the screen, changed its colors to match the next background, and revealed scene 4. Now, this scene was very detailed. I rebuilt the full dashboard design inside After Effects. Every icon, every shape, every text, I animated each part one by one. To keep the scene engaging, I used a close-up camera. This was
May
time-taking,
inukuha ka sa gabi.
but worth it. Now for scene 5,
Oo.
this scene had
Gawin ko na ba umaga?
often visuals on the right.
Yun
This
lang
is
kung may
called
kinukuha
staging.
ako.
Staging means you show
Hindi, wala na.
clear
Nakuha ko
so
na.
the audience
Sige, umaga
knows
mo
what to
lang.
look at.
Balik ko na.
Because we read from left to right,
Kaya nga eh.
the text on the left side was the first thing the audience noticed, and then their eyes will travel on the right side and will see the visuals. Now, scene 6, I showed a chat between an agent and an AI bot. Very simple. Then this phone morphed into a calendar. And the calendar morphed into a graph.
Pasok ka.
So basically, morphing is a great way to connect ideas smoothly. This saved a lot of time because I was able to show all the features in one scene. And then some simple text animation after this. I call this Apple typography as it is inspired from one of the Apple typography video. Do watch it. Then again, using circles, we will animate this design. Now here's a very good trick. If you parent another object to a circle, the object rotates along with it. So instead, I linked the object to the rotation value and added a minus sign in the expression. This way, when the circles rotated forward, the object rotated backward and it stayed straight. I also used this trick earlier in scene 4 with text. So the last scene was simple. I added the closing text, the logo and the call to action. And that's how I made this $450 project in only 3 days. The client loved the video. They had their feedback, so I made the changes and they approved it. I hope you have enjoyed this breakdown. If you want to see more real project case studies and motion design tips, subscribe to House of Mation and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.
Ano pre? Ang big cup.
Yo. Ano?
Pangalan ng bahay.
Big
Mali
cup.
na.
Sus.
Tabingi. Tabingi ito. Hindi ko nagkakain ito.
Tabi niyo yung bahay? O yung...
Hindi naman. Mukhang sa ano lang.
Tingin nga. Let's see.
Yaks, ano to? Kadiri. Tusok.
Tingin, tingin.
Meron dito sa batuan. May naglag ako.
Dito ka sa, yun. Nagagi yung mga ano, pill bag.
Hmm.
Kinuha ko na. Kain yan. Okay naman ah.
Nataasan ko pa. Sobrang
Kaya nga eh.
taas.
Mas mataas pa.
Kaya ba?
Yun ang hindi ko alam. Kahit sana doble lang eh, pwede na eh. May gago hypothermia. What? Ina naman eh.
Level 4 na ba ito? Hindi pa, no?
Hindi pa eh. Shroud Nexus. Gusto mo ba upgrade ko?
Muna.
Kuha ko ng Shroud Nexus doon.
Pero handa mo na kayo kung gusto.
Pwede rin. 5 Shroud Nexus.
Habang akyatan to.
Ay, may edi gawa ka ng ano pre? Jump pad. Kung gusto mo.
Pwede ba yan? Pwede.
Hindi ko nga alam eh. Sa world meron eh. Hindi ko alam kung pwedeng i-craft yan. Lupit nun.
Wala bang teleporter dito?
Sa rin yun. Ay hindi. Lagyan mo yung tali. Ito yung grappling anchor.
Ako nga, no?
Yun pala eh. Mura lang siya oh. Metal sheets lang kailangan. Kuha nga mga metal sheet. Nakalimutan ko. Buti naalala ko.
These are examples of how 3D art is shifting from just being about itself
Salamat sa Wish for having me here. For all you wishers, please subscribe to the Coke Studio YouTube channel, Coke Studio PH, para mapanood ng original performances at pati na rin ang OPM collab sa Season 3 ng Coke Studio. Maraming salamat po.
Huwag na muna natin pag-usapan. Hintayin na lang kinabukasan.
May spark ka dyan, pre.
Yapos.
Nawala.
Anong spark?
Saan napunta yun? Yung mga spark.
Orange? Wala. Yung shroud core lang.
Hardcore lang. Dami naman kailangan nito. 60. Upgrade ko na sa ano. Box na yata.
And I want you, we can bring it on the floor. You never danced like this before. We don't talk about it, dancing on, doing the boogie all night long. Stone in paradise, and talk about it. And I want you, we can bring it on the floor. You never danced like this before. We don't talk about it, dancing on, doing the boogie all night long. Stone in paradise. Shouldn't talk about it. Shouldn't talk about it. Code is turned up for me. No sunshine in goes by absence of you. Suspense controlling my mind. I can't find a way out of here. I want you by my side, so that I'll never feel alone again. And I want you, we can bring it on the floor. You never danced like this before. We don't talk about it, dancing on, doing the boogie all night long. Stone in paradise, shouldn't talk about it. I
Papaalam ko sa work.
Oo.
Blank ko tuloy. Blank. Tapos sa ano, sa page, ay sa website.
We can bring it down the floor. You never danced like this before. We don't talk about it. Dancing on, doing the boogie all night long. Stone in paradise. Shouldn't talk about it.
What's been happening in your world? What have you been up to? I heard that you fell in love, or near enough. I gotta tell you the truth, yeah. I wanna grab both your shoulders and shake, baby, snap out of it. I get the feeling I left it too late, but baby, snap out of it, snap out of it. If that watch don't continue to swing, or if that lady fancies having a sing, I'll be here waiting ever so patiently for you to snap out of it.
May ano ko pala. Recipe.
Ano yun, pre? Nangalin?
Nakapalik ko. Limutan ko yung pangalan.
Hey! You need my help.
Go. May go ka. Go.
Ano yun?
Go. G-O-O.
Gu. Anong kulay? Maraming gu eh.
Walang normal ata ito eh.
Flame gu.
Yung normal.
Baka
Yung
purple
yung
gu.
pinakrap sa alchemist. Yung origata. Origo.
Chocolate.
Sige lang. Lagay mo lang sa chest. Pag gano'n ka.
Ilan?
Dami.
Madami.
I can do it. Birds sing sweet.
Do you want to hear a song? Woohoo!
Kaya gumawa ng 40, pre. 40
Ilang?
pieces.
Goods na yan.
The fuck? Nawala yung ano.
Yung
Nawala yung mga shroud mushroom. 2080. Lima pala. Fuck.
5 ang.
Lima lang ang magagawa.
Nago.
8 pala. 8 pieces. Puputol pa ng puno.
Oh. Joke. Ginang. Hindi pa naman kailangan eh.
Sige. Kuha ka lang dito. Ang lalim pala pre oh.
Yung ano?
Yung kaya mong i-build.
Paano kung malalim?
Tingnan mo yung dilaw. Border.
Bumaba ka? Hanggang dyan na lang. Lalim pa niya. Pwede pala taasan pa natin para mas mataas. Siguro.
Pwede pa nga. Itaas mo yung apoy.
Hmm. Abutin ko yan ng langit.
Ano yun?
Abutin ko ng langit.
Oo. Kung kaya mo.
Di ngayon. Di isang bagsak. Mahirap eh.
Kung gusto mo, doblehin natin yung ano, para mapataas pa. Kuha tayo ng isa pang altar.
Hindi mo na. Mamaya na.
Taas nun. Sige.
Hindi pa muna natin. Yan.
Looking for good bait? You fish and catch nothing. You've still got a lesson.
So one freelance fan asked, why does Seri tolerate Mephid's affection when she's normally so strict with other mages? It was made quite clear in season 2 that Mephid is obsessed with cute and little things and that she likes to pet them. And this is a really good question. Why would Seri, the strongest mage in the world that can kill anyone without so much as lifting a finger and that is generally strict with her subordinates, allow Mephid to pet her? Well, as stated by the user called Cut Rate Revolution, it's because she's insane. Most people look at Seri and see the most knowledgeable and powerful mage in existence and thus treat her with a mixture of respect, fear and awe. However, Mephid ignores all that and goes, oh cute, must pet head, because she's kinda nuts. Also, let's not forget that Seri, despite what she says, is actually fairly kind and respectful to her apprentices, and she simply doesn't know how to react around Mephid since it's a first for her. So one freelance fan asked, why does Seri tolerate Mephid's affection when she's normally so strict with other mages? It was made quite clear in season 2 that Mephid is obsessed with cute and little things and that she likes to pet them. And this is a really good question. Why would Seri, the strongest mage in the world that can kill anyone without so much as lifting a finger and that is generally strict with her subordinates, allow Mephid to pet her? Well, as stated by the user called Cut Rate Revolution, it's because she's insane. Most people look at Seri and see the most knowledgeable and powerful mage in existence and thus treat her with a mixture of respect, fear and awe. However, Mephid ignores all that and goes, oh cute, must pet head, because she's kinda nuts. Also, let's not forget that Seri, despite what she says, is actually fairly kind and respectful to her apprentices, and she simply doesn't know how to react around Mephid since it's a first for her. So one freelance fan asked, why does Seri tolerate Mephid's affection when she's normally so strict with other mages?
The main plot points and characters, but with none of the soul and finesse of the original. The premise of the show is that a Britannian splinter group, known as the Neo-Britannian Empire, has somewhat taken over the Japanese island of Hokkaido, where they rule it with an iron fist, treating the native Japanese population as second-class citizens. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because it's an exact copy of the situation at the beginning of the original Code Geass with Britannia's conquest of Japan, where they rename it to Area 11 and treat the native Japanese population as second-class citizens. If it weren't already apparent, there will be minor spoilers for Rosie of the Recapture and major spoilers for the original Code Geass. The main character is Sakuya Subaragi, a betrayed and cast-out member of the Britannian royal family, who has a Geass that allows her to control people, kind of like Lelouch. Her primary motivation is to rescue her close childhood friend, who has been manipulated by the big bad on the Britannian side into becoming a figurehead for them, kind of like Donnelly. Sakuya fights alongside Ash, a Britannian assassin who has been manipulated by Sakuya into fighting for her, kind of like Rolo. In order to achieve her goals, Sakuya allies herself with a Japanese resistance group that happens to feature an ace pilot with colorful short hair who goes on to pilot the Resistance's Ace Nightmare frame that just so happens to specialize in close quarters combat, kind of like Colin. The leader of the resistance group is a former Japanese military commander who they bust out of a Britannian prison, kind of like Toto. There's also a Britannian knight who defects because he once served the protagonist's mother, kind of like Jeremiah Gottwald. I could go on and on about the similarities. The first episode even features a hamstrung chess metaphor that has zero relevance to how the game is actually played in real life. Facially, all of the elements of the original Code Geass have been recreated. All they need is Pizza Hut product placement. But the show just feels like a shallow attempt to recreate the original that feels like it fundamentally misunderstands what made the original Code Geass good. To be clear, Rosie of the Recapture isn't offensively terrible by any stretch of the imagination. And in fairness, I'm only writing this where the show is 7 episodes in, so there's always the possibility that the show will really surprise me and dramatically change my opinion. After watching episode 7, it seems like the plot is finally starting to pick up and move in an original direction. But the first 6 episodes really do feel like a hollow cash grab to prey on the nostalgia of people who grew up with the original Code Geass like myself. For starters, the show has been terribly marketed and promoted. At least anecdotally, I had no idea they were even making this sequel to Code Geass, and I only found out about the show after one of my friends sent me the first episode. When I asked my college roommate whose favorite anime was Code Geass, he told me that he also had no idea that this show was being made, a sentiment that seems pretty common poking around online. It also probably doesn't help that the show is Disney Plus exclusive for some reason. One of the biggest problems of this show is just how insanely contrived the premise is, just so that it could shoehorn in an almost one-to-one recreation of the original. After Lelouch ascended to the throne of the Holy Britannian Empire, it's established that he abolished the aristocracy, with most of the Britannian nobles being either enslaved by Esgias or killed after Schneisel dropped a flail on the Britannian capital of Pendragon. Knowing this, I spent most of the first episode scratching my head, wondering who the hell these guys were, claiming to be the continuation of the Holy Britannian Empire. Secondly, you have to wonder how some ragtag Britannian splinter group managed to seize control of the entirety of Hokkaido without the Black Knights and the United Federation of Nations intervening to stop them. Presumably, the Black Knights are still in control of the world's biggest military and the absolute behemoths of the Gurren and the Lancelot. So far, the only characters from the original series that have done anything are Cornelia and for some reason Nina, making you wonder why Colin or Suzaku didn't just saunter over and put an end to this whole situation. The explanation in the show is that Hokkaido is surrounded by some kind of barrier that has allowed them to repel interventions from the Black Knights. The barrier also conveniently saps energy from Sakuradite, explaining the reduction in power level from the end of Season 2 and the Resurrection movie, where seemingly everyone's nightmare is now flying around and shooting energy beams. I'm sure there's some kind of explanation for why a random Japanese island has such an overpowered force field, but it seems to me that this is just an incredibly contrived plot device to allow the writers to retread the guerrilla resistance group versus domineering Britannian military dynamic from the original Code Geass Season 1. The timeline only gets more confused in Episode 7 when it's revealed that Norland, the primary antagonist, was a Knight of the Round. He's shown talking to Bismarck, the Knight of One, begging the question of what on earth he was doing during the entirety of Emperor Lelouch's reign. As a side note, Bismarck showing up for one throwaway line has to be the most Bismarck thing ever, considering that he shows up for one scene in the original for the sole purpose of showing that Suzaku is so OP, he can defeat a guy who can literally see the future. Apparently, the explanation for all these inconsistencies is contained in a pamphlet that was only distributed to Japanese theater audiences. This has to be one of the laziest and stupidest methods of delivering exposition I've ever seen. They could have at least given us a voiceover from C2 explaining the situation, but no, the entire background setting up this show is restricted to physical flyers that only people who watched the show in Japanese theaters got to read. Complaints about world building aside, what made the original Code Geass interesting was seeing how Lelouch connives and schemes, leveraging his Geass power to slowly build up the Black Knights from a heavily outgunned and outmatched ragtag resistance group into a bona fide fighting force able to resist the Britannians on equal footing. While Lelouch succeeds more often than he fails, we see Lelouch stumble a lot, especially in the first season. Seeing Lelouch's arrogance and overconfidence constantly come back to bite him is an important part of his development as a character. After his initial success in the Shinjuku ghetto that allows him to kill Clovis, Lelouch gets lured into a trap by Cornelia, who is aware of Clovis's defeat at the Shinjuku ghetto. Cornelia is then able to turn the tide on Lelouch, trouncing this particular resistance group and nearly capturing him, with Lelouch only managing to get away because of C2's intervention. A big part of what makes Code Geass good is seeing Lelouch develop and mature over the course of the series. At the outset, he's just some high school student with a bigger than average brain that gets granted a supernatural power. Of course, he's going to make mistakes, whether it's being outmatched by Cornelia or abandoning the Black Rebellion at its crucial moment. By comparison, it never really feels like there are stakes in Rose of the Recapture. From the very first episode, it's established that Ash is completely overpowered. We watch him basically single-handedly destroy like 20 nightmare frames by himself without breaking a sweat. While we do see the resistance groups getting trounced by the Neo-Britannians, it never really feels like Rose or the protagonists are ever actually at risk because of how insanely strong Ash is. Code Geass has never really been a stranger to throwaway villains that just die without any plot relevance, but Rose of the Recapture tosses them at the viewer at an extraordinary rate, with Ash offing a bunch of supposedly high-ranking members of the Neo-Britannia nobility one after another. Even though Rose of the Recapture facially recreates the guerrilla group versus domineering military power dynamic of the original, it doesn't have any of the same stakes or intrigue because of Ash.
Compare, for instance, the Neo-Britannians' efforts to wipe out a large Japanese settlement with a Phleia to Lelouch's battle with Cornelia at Narita. Even putting aside the massive question of where on earth the Neo-Britannians managed to procure a Damocles, considering we see the Damocles fly into the sun at the end of Season 2, the battle goes completely in the Resistance's favor, despite the fact that they are ostensibly meant to be significantly outmatched militarily. In the original Code Geass, the justification for why Suzaku can execute the insanely tight execution requirements to make the Phleia Eliminator work is because he is able to leverage Lelouch's Geass command to live. Meanwhile, Ash is able to get the Phleia Eliminator to work, albeit with somewhat more relaxed requirements, because he's just that skilled of a pilot. On the other hand, while Lelouch is initially able to get the jump on Cornelia by setting off a massive landslide that takes out a large number of her forces, this still doesn't change the fact that the Black Knights and the Japan Liberation Front are severely outgunned. The Black Knights and the JLF rely on outdated budais that are significantly inferior to the Sutherlands that the Britannians field. While the Black Knights have Kala's Gurren, she herself is not enough to single-handedly overcome this massive disparity in forces. Colin, still being high school aged herself, is still an amateur pilot, and it shows in this battle. Cornelia is able to fight her to a draw, despite her Gloucester being an inferior unit to the Gurren, and Colin eventually gets the Gurren's Radiant Wave Surger disabled, forcing Lelouch to call a retreat. The best encapsulation of how Rose just fundamentally lacks the essence of what made the original Code Geass interesting is in the super hamstrung chess reference in the first episode. The chess metaphors in the original Code Geass were always a little specious, with the game always serving as a useful visual metaphor rather than any deep comparison about the actual rules of the game. For instance, Colin's codename is Q1, signifying her importance as the Black Knight's ace pilot, much like how the Queen is the most powerful unit in chess, while the other more disposable members are given the designation of pawns. Lelouch, as the Black King, isn't merely a spectator, but an active participant in the battle. Despite being the most important piece on the board, he himself is not particularly useful in battle, which is why he operated a budai with a funny hat for much of the first season, though this metaphor gets a little strained later on when he gets the Gawain and the Shinkido. On the other hand, the chess game that Rose plays against Creed Kirkwain has genuinely zero symbolic or plot importance. It's almost like the writers just thought to themselves, well, we need to fit some reference to chess into the show because that's just what happens in Code Geass. The watering down of chess as a symbol was a perfect symbolic representation of what's wrong with Rose of the Recapture. It facially reproduces the same elements that made up the original Code Geass without understanding what made them work or what people liked about them. The original Code Geass had many things going on, but at its core, it's a story about competing political and philosophical ideologies. The central conflict for much of the show is between Lelouch's desire to reshape the world for the better through any means necessary, even if those means are violent and deceptive, and Suzaku, who is steadfastly self-righteous, preferring to work within the confines of the rules, even if it prevents him from ever achieving his grander ambitions. Later on, the show becomes about Lelouch and Schneisel's competing philosophies. Rosie of the Recapture has yet to capture anything deeper in this regard. Another problem with Rose of the Recapture is that the new Neo-Britannians are just uninteresting antagonists. They are comically evil, taking the whole killing civilians part of the original to an entirely different level. I made this point in one of the first videos I ever made on YouTube, but from a tactical perspective, arbitrarily killing civilians is a terrible idea. All it does is completely alienate the local population whose support you need and encourages attacks on partisans and guerrillas. The main antagonist has the most obvious char clone mask. It seems to have no real motivations other than just being a massive dick for the sake of it. Of course, this could change in the future, but the Neo-Britannians are caricatures of the originals in all the worst ways. While the Britannians of Code Geass are all clearly racist pricks, some of them do have some legitimate complexity. Cornelia, while a brutal and cutthroat governor of Area 11, shows genuine compassion for Euphemia and her subordinates. Her attack on the Saitama Ghetto has a legitimate military purpose of luring out Zero, unlike the Neo-Britannians who just seem to kill the Japanese for fun and sport. The attack using the Damocles seems to have no real strategic relevance, aside from giving the writers an excuse to give Nina something to do and score nostalgia brownie points for bringing the Damocles back. Schneisel, while a calculating and manipulative bastard, has a generally coherent worldview and serves as a useful foil for
Pre.
Lelouch. Meanwhile,
Ilan
the
to?
Neobritannians, chief among
39?
Ano yan? Game mo lang dyan?
Lagay ko lang dito. Sige.
them Lord Norland von Luneburg, are portrayed as over-the-top evil, with Norland being shown killing literal children in cold blood multiple times. With the exception of Nara, who is seemingly being teed up for a redemption arc, this show's antagonists all seem to either die off without any real plot relevance, or they're just one-dimensionally evil to the point of ridiculousness. As a final complaint, I'm also not really a fan of the new Nightmare frame designs for Rosie of the Recapture. They all seem extremely busy and not visually appealing to look at, with the CG battles not doing that much benefit. I really like the original mech designs from Code Geass, particularly for some of the early grunt suits like the Sutherlands, Budais, or Gloucesters. I've always been a sucker for grunt suits, particularly those with more militaristic and chunkier designs. The Zowert and Heinrich Sturm are my favorite designs from The Witch from Mercury, if that tells you anything. And of course, the original Lancelot and Guren designs are iconic classics. This is a problem that the original Code Geass started running into towards the end of its run, and especially in the Resurrection movie, but the mech designs in Rosie of the Recapture are just way too busy. Ash's Z Apollo, and particularly the combined Z Ortegia, are the prime culprits here. You can also look at the Camden, which serves as the grunt suit for the Neo-Britannians, and compare it to the Sutherlands. It might just be personal preference, but I would take the Sutherlands design any day of the week. Coming off The Witch from Mercury, which has some truly beautiful mech battles with some of the best sound design I've ever experienced, what we get in Rosie of the Recapture just pales in comparison, to the point where I still strongly prefer the 2D animation styles of the originals from nearly 20 years ago. The fights in Rosie of the Recapture just don't seem to have the same oomph as the original, with a lot of battles seemingly just consisting of the Z Apollo zipping around at high speeds. The broader issue seems to be that Studio Sunrise just genuinely doesn't seem to know where it wants to take the Code Geass franchise. It's not really a secret that Gundam and mecha more generally have been in a bit of a rut for the past 20 years. While Sunrise has had some success with Iron-Blooded Orphans and more recently with The Witch from Mercury, mecha anime has fallen pretty far from the pre-2000s era. The original Code Geass came off the heels of what was possibly the last true breakout mecha hit in the massively successful Gundam Seed and Gundam Seed Destiny. Seed Destiny aired at the highly coveted primetime 6 p.m. broadcast slot on Saturdays. While the original groundwork was being laid for Code Geass, it was assumed that the show would continue in that same time slot vacated by Seed Destiny. However, by the end of its run, Seed Destiny's ratings started to fall off a cliff because of massive production issues that forced them to stuff in a bunch of recap episodes. Because of this, Code Geass got booted from the 6 p.m. time slot to 2 a.m. While the 6 p.m. evening time slot was meant for mainstream audiences, the late night broadcast slot is generally meant for more niche otaku shows. Originally, the plot for Code Geass was meant to be more grounded and less fantastical. In an interview with Okochi Ichiro, the man who wrote the original story and series composition, he stated that the original plan for Code Geass was to have it revolve around two men from the same military unit who have competing ideals. The first character, a commander in his late 20s, got turned into Lelouch, while the second character, a teenager, got turned into Suzaku. It was only after the time slot change that the school setting and Geass were added in to appeal to the late night anime audience. Because of all of these changes in the late night time slot, no one really initially expected Code Geass to blow up into the massive success that it became. By 2008, the franchise had sold over 1 million DVDs, making it a success beyond Sunrise's wildest dreams. I get the sense that during the 2010s, Sunrise just didn't really know where to take the Gundam franchise, considering that there was a 6-year gap between Gundam 00 and Iron-Blooded Orphans, and then another 6-year gap between Iron-Blooded Orphans and The Witch from Mercury. To fill this dearth of content, the logical choice would be to start leveraging the success of the Code Geass brand. The only problem here is that the ending of the original Code Geass was a little too definitive, not leaving much room open for more considering Lelouch is dead, and he achieved his goal of creating world peace. Sunrise's first major foray into expanding the Code Geass universe was with Akito the Exiled. By focusing on the European front during the intermission between seasons 1 and 2, they conveniently sidestepped the whole ending problem, similar to what Sunrise has done with their many one-year war side stories, like Thunderbolt or the 08th MS team for the mainline UC Gundam franchise. It's been almost 10 years since I've watched the Akito movies, but I remember them suffering from broadly the same issue, where it wasn't entirely clear what direction Sunrise wanted to take this side series. The big symptom of this problem was how they kept giving Lelouch cameos during the Akito movies, but he doesn't really do anything the entire time. Lelouch's weird non-role in the Akito movies is reflective of how they both understand how critical Lelouch is to the brand of Code Geass, but they also can't quite figure out how to keep the series going without him, considering, he's supposed to be dead. So to rectify this, they went back to the drawing board and pushed out those alternate timeline movies where they retconned Lelouch's death so that they could justify making more Code Geass content. They eventually released Code Geass Lelouch of the Resurrection in 2019 and announced that they had a grand 10-year plan for the franchise. The sense I get from Rose of the Recapture is that they're trying to tread a similar path as what happened after the original Mobile Suit Gundam, with the original protagonist and Amado Ray transitioning into something of an elder statesman who was a supporting character in Zeta Gundam before returning to play a more prominent role in Char's counterattack. Likewise, it seems like Lelouch is going to play only a minor, if any, role in Rose of the Recapture, with characters from the original Code Geass making only small cameo appearances. The comparison is also furthered by the fact that the primary antagonist for Rose is an over-the-top Char clone, and the reborn Britannian Empire is called the Neo-Britannian Empire. Very subtle, Sunrise. While Zeta Gundam shares some of the high-level plot points and character arcs as the original Mobile Suit Gundam, the shows have meaningful differences. In the original, it's heavily implied that the Earth Federation is highly corrupt and pretty incompetent, making the conflict of the Titans in Zeta Gundam a logical follow-up. Camille is also a meaningfully distinct character from Amado, even if they still go on to have the same high-level coming-of-age story. On the other hand, Rose of the Recapture attempts to recreate the original a little too closely, copying characters and plot points in a way that neither makes sense given the ending of the original Code Geass and the overall premise of the show. For example, Rose's Geass functions in pretty much the exact same way as Lelouch, when they could have easily given her some unique power. The core issue here is that Okochi basically wrote himself into a corner with the ending of Code Geass. The conclusion to Lelouch's story is still over 15 years later, widely held up as one of the greatest anime endings of all time. So to retcon it for the purposes of milking more money out of the franchise is always going to rub people the wrong way. To be clear, I don't hate Rose of the Recapture. It's a perfectly fine show on its own merits. It's not particularly spectacular, but it's also not offensively terrible either. And as a mecha fan, I will take anything I can get at this point. Ultimately, Rose of the Recapture could have easily been a standalone franchise, and I wouldn't have half of these complaints. But by billing it as a sequel to one of the most beloved anime of all time, you will naturally invite comparison. This show has none of the finesse and none of the intricacies that made Code Geass such a beloved show among anime fans. It is at best a cheap copy and at worst actively undermines the legacy and art of the original. Time sought vacated by Seed Destiny. However, by the end of its run, Seed Destiny's ratings started to fall off a cliff because of massive production issues that forced him to stuff in a bunch of recap.
Hello, and welcome to Replay Round. When I think of Code Geass, I think of Jibun Wo, which I almost can't say without singing, an alternate history that I wish more material would explore, several fascinating characters, Matter Sky, and an incredibly satisfying conclusion to one of my favorite anime ever. But that's because I love Code Geass, in spite of its flaws, from its treatment of chess, the soft reset in Season 2 to force back the school setting, the second OP, the unprompted fan service. But none of those issues that I have are as widely divisive as the scene referenced in the title of this video. One that is so memorable that people who have seen it know exactly what I'm talking about just by mentioning the one character's name. And there's a pretty good chance that even if you've only heard of Code Geass, this sequence is so ubiquitous in criticism of it that you would likely be able to intuit what I meant by the Euphemia moment. Because this scene, for better or worse, is a part of Code Geass's lasting legacy, the moment the show allegedly jumped the shark, and one that I'll be taking it upon myself to defend here. I'll also be outlining why I think this sequence got a bad rap, and arguably still deserves it, in addition to all the usual scene analysis, bells and whistles, so that everyone is refreshed as to the major elements at play in this scene. Bloodstained Yuffie is one of the last
Lelouch is not the most important thing in the Code Geass franchise. That may sound odd to a lot of Code Geass fans.
Cheer lang.
Sige lang.
All right, I want to give you an update on the markets, oil, and what's going on. And this is your headline, CNBC. It says oil prices rise. So basically, oil's going up right now. As Trump warns Iran to open Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday or face hell. That's coming from Trump. We looked at his whacked out tweet in the last video. We haven't seen already. It's just crazy as crazy is. Then you got this from Bloomberg. Oil rises on new deadline as Trump raises the stakes over Hormuz. And I was thinking about this stuff today, and I just like to talk to you guys about this stuff like normal people. It just feels like we're stuck in this weird timeline game show reality TV where it's kind of like a combination of Price is Right and Name That Oil Tune, I guess, right? And Price is Right, if you guys know the show, it's like you bid on how high you or how much you think something costs, and that's the moment. It's just like, I think oil's gonna be 150. Do I hear 175, 200? Come on down. You're the next contestant on Oil is Right, I guess, right? And it is that ridiculous. Honestly, it is that ridiculous. And then this is what we're talking about right now, is basically countries are losing faith in the U.S. And so Bloomberg reached out to several representatives from around the world, be it Europe, Asia, otherwise, and this is what you get. Trump risks confidence in U.S. role as guardian of global shipping. So I guess this is a con game now, talking about confidence, for real. I'll read it. It says, European and Asian officials who spoke to Bloomberg on the condition of anonymity, so basically they are talking to people who are high enough to where they don't want to necessarily give their name, said the conflict has eroded faith in the U.S. role as protector of the high seas, raising concerns about energy prices, shifting uncertainty, and calculations about key choke points, and growing doubts about Washington's ability to manage the consequences of the war. So people that just don't have any faith that stuff that Trump says. And the more that he tries to play his, effectively Name That Oil Tune or Price is Right on oil, right? The game show aspect of it. And every time there's some sort of deadline, he comes with a new deadline. It's like the boy who cried wolf over and over again. And there comes a point you're just like, I don't care what the dude says, right? And this is sort of where we're at. And so this is always fascinating to see the stuff that Trump tweets and how much the markets react. So at the moment, though, oil is going up. However, this is interesting. It appears that Iran and Iraq might have made some sort of deal. And I think China's probably involved with this stuff. You never know for sure. I always say that because there's so many players and pieces in motion. But at the moment, it says Iran allows Iraqi ships through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's not completely blocked. If you make some sort of deal or whatever, you can get your ships through. Iran at the moment is also trying to charge $2 million per ship. You hear mixed reports on that. Let me read the quote. It's actually quite interesting. It says, a tanker carrying Iraqi oil, and the name of the tanker is Ocean Thunder. And I've been learning lots of names of tankers during this whole thing. I was thinking about that, and this is one of my favorite ones, Ocean Thunder. Passed through the strait, closed to the Iranian coast on Sunday, so recently. And here's a quote. Brotherly Iraq is exempt from any restrictions we have imposed on the Strait of Hormuz, as those restrictions only apply to hostile states. So it appears that Iran's trying to reach out, a handshake to their neighbor Iraq, like, hey, we'll let your oil pass through, don't attack us or whatever. So I'm just telling you what it feels like to me. And I think a lot of countries then are trying to line up to figure out, who do I think has control of the strait? I think this is just a logical thing that a country would do, like if you want to sell oil, ship oil, whatever, or if you want to receive the oil, get the oil because your country needs it, you're just thinking, okay, who do I do business now with? Who do I think controls it? And so it'll be kind of interesting to see which country decide to cut a deal with Iran. And I think that certainly weakens Trump, and that goes back to people that lose faith in stuff that Trump says or lose confidence in Trump's ability to, control the strait or keep trade open. This is also going on, and there's a lot happening today. This was a new one. I didn't know about this one. It says countries must not hoard fuel during Iran war. I know I shouldn't laugh at this stuff. We're in a whacked out, absurd world right now, and everyone's scrounging around for oil. Basically, right? It's not just oil. Actually, fertilizer or anything connected to food is deeply important. We're getting to planting seasons in multiple countries, and then this guy, his name is Fatih Birol. He was making kind of a veiled attack against China, who apparently he's accusing of hoarding fuel. They're saying China has cut their exports. It says, while he carefully not to name China directly, Burrell's comments appear to be aimed at Beijing. China is the only major country to have banned the export of petrol, diesel, and jet fuel. And there's different categories with this stuff, right? So we're talking about various industries, be it trucking, be it food, be it travel, right? All these things are connected. Now, while we're talking about the money, and I want to bring this up because this was actually a really interesting thing by the Bloomberg also. Now, I knew this stuff was going on, but the way they illustrated it is very well done because it talks about essentially the Trump people and Republicans, and this also affects people, say, in the UK, which I want to hear from people out there, or Canada or otherwise, the banking. And the idea is that if you're in an industry that has a lot of suspicious money, the bank will be like, you know what, you're not going to use our bank anymore. And what could suspicious money be? So let me, first, this is the headline. It says, "Debanking is a confusing nightmare. It's a risk of getting worse." Okay. So sometimes your bank account will get turned off for whatever reason, and you're just like, I don't know what the heck is going on, and you could be totally innocent, okay? So there's certainly that, and then people get kind of really ticked off, which I completely understand. If, like, you lose access to your money, completely understand. You're like, man, what the heck is going on? So the reason is that there are systems in place, sometimes automated, sometimes human, but a lot of it's automated first, to if the bank flags suspicious activity on your account, right? And the idea would be like, just a simple example. Let's say, if you guys know the show, like a Breaking Bad kind of show, or these kind of things where you're doing all sorts of illegal activity and you're getting a lot of cash, and like every day at midnight or whatever, you put in cash, and the bank would know when you're putting in how much cash and at what time. It's like, man, that's kind of suspicious. Where's all this cash coming from? So that kind of stuff. So the Trumps want to weaken those kind of laws. This is the way they describe it. So it says, Trump regulators rewrite some of the policies that can trigger debanking. They risk making it harder to firms to expel clients suspected of criminal activity or more reticent to explain reasons for turning them away. Some of these things would be U.S. like money laundering would be category, or sanctions violations, elder fraud, problematic business relationships, and then any number of things. I'm just giving a general idea, or crypto stuff could be as well. So the Trumps always complain about, oh, why are you debanking us that way? So basically, they want to weaken those laws, and this becomes important when you understand what's going on, because clearly someone's profiting, or parties, right? Who knows how many people are profiting off of Trump's tweet? I think we all know this stuff. Prediction markets pardons spark questions over who's profiting from Trump's presidency. So whenever Trump pardons someone, people are betting on who's he going to pardon next, or who's he going to fire next, because people are going to be on the inside track of this kind of stuff. Or when's Trump going to do X? What's he going to tweet out? What words will he say? Whatever, right? You guys get the gist of this. And you have to understand this stuff as well. It's like, it's also connected to Trump's kids profiting off this stuff. They're trying to sell drones in the Mideast as we speak. This is dated April 3rd. Company backed by Trump's sons look to sell drone interceptors to Gulf states being attacked by Iran. So it's like, think of it this way. If you extend the war and then you destroy our assets purposely, because I just learned that we lost not only 2 C-130s, those are the transport planes, we also lost a couple helicopters in this as well. So this was about the rescue thing. And I'm sure as it comes out more, we'll like, oh my God, we lost even more equipment. So we're spending all this money burning all this equipment. And then lo and behold, hey, we got the replacements. We're going to sell you a bunch of stuff. Oh, and by the way, it's the Trump kids who own said companies, connected to said company. I mean, it's all in public. You can see it right here. And while this stuff is happening, and again, I just want to talk to normal people about this stuff, the regular American is struggling. And at the moment, this was a really interesting one. And I want to hear from homeowners in our community about this stuff. It says the typical U.S. home is 44 years old and needs a ton of work. Right? And so basically, maintenance on homes is expensive. I think you all know that. And costs are indeed going up because of inflation and such. The way they describe it here, and I always like to hear from people in our community who see it in their neighborhoods. It says a home construction boom sprouted across America in the roaring 20s. Okay, so that was like 100 years ago. Millions more single-family units went up across suburbia after World War II. Buildings surged again in the 1970s. So I want to hear from people who were in the 1970s compared to today. Do you feel like there are a lot more, say, single-family units in the 70s than now? I just want to hear from people who lived through. That's before my time. I was born mid-70s, so I have no recollection of this stuff. I just like to hear about this because then it kind of makes sense that the numbers is medium home is a record 44 years old, right? So homes are getting old. Here's a chart on that. It says the age of America's homes. So this is in the millions at the top there. And then basically there's a whole bunch of homes that are like 55 years or older. And that's kind of approaching the nearly 30 million. And then you got a bunch that are anywhere from 14 years or less to 45 to 55. I'm just throwing a chart up there. You guys can see it for yourself. And the way one person described it was pretty funny. This is like a financial planner. It says, you're not just buying an older home, you're buying a maintenance schedule. And that's actually a really good way to put it. And I would argue the same thing with a car or a boat, whatever. Actually, the joke I used to always say, or still say really, is if you buy a car, it's a black hole that sits in your driveway that you dump money into. And if you buy a boat, it's a boat that sits it's a black hole that sits in the water that you dump money into, right? So a home, I guess, these days, if you buy an older one, sure, absolutely, maintenance for sure. And then to put that in perspective, it's talking about like how cost of maintenance has gone up. The cost of home maintenance, even after accounting for broader inflation, structural repairs costs grew by 14.1%, okay? And then you also have plumbing jump by like 23.6%. So, and then you got parts and labor going up. And so then like your food costs are higher, your energy costs are higher, and then fixing your home costs more. I think you guys all know all these things. And I also want to give you an international perspective because we're all facing this. This is our headlines here in Korea. It's the same thing that you're all facing in the USA or otherwise. Korea faces mounting inflationary pressure from Middle East conflict. And they're talking about transport, food, consumer goods. Basically, everything's going up in price. And people were all eyeing it together. We're all in this together. And I think that's what's so disturbing about what the Trump people and Trump himself are talking about on a daily basis, is because Trump is so disconnected from the world. You know, he grew up on the golden toilet, tweets out from his golden toilet, these kind of things. He has no idea how regular people live. And that's why I like to go through all the numbers with you and guys, keep you honest, talk about this kind of stuff, because there are still other sane people out there. I know it may not feel like that if you hang out on YouTube or social media, people scream. Nonstop or whatever, but what we really need in this world is just more people who talk in reality and want to sit down and talk like stuff like this, like adults. That's my view on this kind of stuff. And I know it's hard to have these conversations in this whacked out world where Trump constantly tweets out like a toddler, and then I have to go through and try to interpret this stuff the same way that Marcus does. It's like, okay, what's the oil tune today, right? And this is in our business news. Oil prices rise as Trump warns Iran to open Strait of Hormuz by Tuesday or face hell. So that's my thoughts on this stuff. Yes, it is crazy. And I want to hear from you, and I'll catch you all in the next video.
Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and in this saga of mass surveillance. I know I've been talking about it a lot, but it seems like things are ramping up even faster than I expected. Ladies and gentlemen, Apple decides that they're gonna usher in the world of age verification. Yeah, literally baked right into your cell phones. Now I'm gonna be completely real with you, regardless of if you're an Apple user or, an Android user, right? Like, depending on which operating system you have, you're all pretty much screwed, okay? Literally the best way to handle this, and I'm not even joking with you, is probably go back to the days of dumb phone engages, okay? Like where this kind of crap never existed. Anyways, though, I don't have this stuff sitting on my desk for no reason. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the message that it seems people in the United Kingdom are getting. Confirm you're 18 to update your restrictions. We're at a point where downloading an application off of the App Store might require you to confirm your identity. Now, before we go into this, I just want to say this might actually be probably the best of the dog shit that we're getting, okay? Now, I'm not a fan of any of this. I think you all know this. But I'm at a point where I'm looking at probably the somewhat best implementation. So the way that this works is Apple says they're going to use information about your payment methods or actually see how long you have an Apple account to confirm you're an adult. Now, if you're somebody like me, you probably made your Apple account back in like, the 2010s, late 2000s. And if you're that old, like if your account is that old, Apple's probably going to say, yeah, this guy's probably 18 years of age. Like if your account is 18, you're 18. And that's a normal way to look at it, right? But of course, this is the way that Apple's going to do it. Use a credit card to confirm you're an adult. So basically, you take your credit card out, you put it in front of the screen, Apple looks at your credit card and says, whoa, you're over 18. Now, why is a credit card a good method? Because the credit card, no matter where you live, from my understanding, you've got to be over the age of 18 to get one. You might be like, but what about minors? They have access to credit cards only if they're connected through their mommy and daddy's bank account, from my understanding at least. At least in Canada, a minor cannot sign a credit card contract. And that's a good thing, okay? Credit card companies are fucking terrible. If you use a credit card, use it like a debit card. Don't fall into credit card debt. Of course, obviously everyone can't control that. And this is not me doing the credit cards or predatory rant, okay? I'm just giving you my honest opinion on this. But yeah, using your credit card to verify your age, actually not a bad idea. To be fair with you, even Steam does this. It's basically the bare minimum you can do to actually get there. Now, what is the problem with the credit card method that can easily be identified by you? Well, if you pay attention, mommy and daddy's credit card usually gets given to little kids to buy things like V-Bucks. Now, again, this is not proper age verification, because if this was age verification, they would probably be needing identification cards or something. And here's the problem with all of these
pa 2,000.